Welcome to Worth It. I'm your host, Lonnie Buse, and also welcome to this live interview and training network, HYPNO 24/7. And I encourage you to check out all the other shows on this network, such as Trancing in the Sheets with Kaz Riley, which no topic is taboo when it comes to sexual freedom. You can also check out Greg Beckett with Time to Get Unstuck, where him and his guest ponder one word and have a meaningful conversation around that word. And also check out Paul Ramsey, the Fat Hypnotist. Yes, that's what he calls himself. It's basically his journey through weight loss. And it's really authentic and vulnerable, and it's a really good show. So I encourage you to check it out. And the amazing guest I have today is Kelley T. Woods. Now, Kelley T. Woods is a practicing, certified clinical hypnotherapist since 2002, and she's based in the Pacific Northwest, and she specializes in everything. So basically, essentially, pain control, weight loss, athletic performance, pediatric hypnosis. She is an expert when it comes to working with kids. She has authored and co-authored several books, and just some of them is Pediatric Pain Control, Weight Loss with Hypnosis, and Integrative Hypnosis for Kids and Teens. And how I most know Kelley is from her amazing Facebook group, which she co-runs, and it's basically called Hypnotic Women. And if you're a female hypnotist or hypnotherapist, I strongly encourage you to join. It's been an indispensable medium for me in my growth and learning as a practitioner. So welcome, and I'm so happy you're here with me today. Welcome, Kelley T. Woods.
Hi, Lonnie. Thanks for having me on this interview, and I love the topic that you asked me to speak with you about.
Great, good. And we'll get right into that. So, I mean, essentially, as you know, this show, Worth It, is basically around feelings of inadequacy despite success. And you know, as that popularized term, it's been coined impostor syndrome, right? But as we know, as hypnotists, when we consider something a syndrome, we're essentially asking people to associate with some sort of like disorder, right? Like something's like wrong, or even a disease. A syndrome can be considered a disease. So first off, how would you have us, be viewers of watching this, how would you have us start looking at this completely differently?
Well, certainly reframing things can be helpful to us, but I do think that sometimes a person can feel validated when there's an actual name. And sometimes it can give them access to certain services. And really, that's one of the reasons why the DSM-5 has disorders, is because it will open the doors for people to get medical treatment, mental health care, because insurance will cover it. But most of us lay hypnotists operate outside of that realm of insurance. And so we tend to really look at some of these names sometimes as a detriment to a person. That might be a trap, maybe a set of golden handcuffs per se. I think what's most important is to make the distinction over whether someone really does have imposter syndrome. Because I think that it's a term that's really bandied about very freely. And it may not be a case of imposter syndrome at all. It might be something else posing as that. And so if any of your listeners are wondering right now, if they suffer from imposter syndrome, they might want to think about some of the differences between that particular malady and feelings of just maybe not being good enough or not being qualified enough based on reality. Maybe they're pretending. Maybe they're imitating some leader in their industry and really trying to copy them in a way that doesn't feel congruent with who they really are. Maybe they are presenting as an expert when they really aren't, when they really don't have that level of knowledge or experience. And so in that case, it could be something different. Now, you know, some of the traits of imposter syndrome are that you do have the experience, you do have the education or the knowledge required to be an authority on a particular topic, and yet you still have this sense of chronic self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really where that imposter name comes in there. And sometimes these people will discount themselves and their skill set. They'll credit it to just being lucky, or maybe they'll credit to someone else. And I see that happen often in our field. Someone who's very competent, and yet they'll give credit to a teacher or a partner in a project, and really have just a little bit of excess humility. I studied karate for 15 years, Lonnie, and I remember in the very beginning, my sensei saying this to our dojo. He said, "It is not good to pretend to be too big, but neither is it good to pretend to be too small."
Wow.
And this may be what some people who are suffering from imposter syndrome are doing. But I think there's often a sense of not deserving success. And this can be seeded very early on in life. It can be some kind of cultural or familial or even religious set of values that are now in conflict with this person. If they have achieved a certain level of success financially or otherwise in their life, it may be in conflict with what those values that were given very early on are saying to them. You think of phrases like filthy rich, which infers that having money is a dirty thing, right? And many wealthy people in our culture are not respected, maybe because of their public behavior or this perception that they're greedy in some way. And so when we really dig deeper and think about our values and also our attitudes about success, and money is just one reflection of success, people can go deeper and think about what does money mean to them? What does it represent? To me, it represents freedom. And freedom is a value that is very important to me. And so when we start to peel back the layers, we can get a little bit more understanding about where this is really rooted in. And then we can start to address that. I think that having people make that distinction is probably the first step. What do you think about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I love that you made that awareness that there is, there's a distinction between having this kind of concept of having a high competence, but while having low confidence, or the difference between, that and, maybe it's realistic for you to not have high confidence if you feel like you're not highly competent in something. So there's that distinction, which I appreciate that you made. And also kind of like how this is stemming from childhood and things like that. So what do you think some people, if they want to make that distinction, if they're kind of pondering, like, do I have imposter syndrome? Like, what are some of the ways in which they kind of peel back the layers and discover that for themselves?
That's a great question. I think that reflecting on experience is important. We've had at least one generation, maybe two, that were raised in our country being told that they could do anything. And we've seen, and you've possibly worked with, some of the results of this, because I've had young adults coming into me that feel worthless, that really don't have the resilience that they need to be surviving in the world and to be thriving. And Carol Dweck talks about this in her excellent book, Mindset, which is a recommended read for anybody who's interested in this topic. She makes the point that we don't build our self-worth by being told that we're excellent in something. We build it through experience. And so if a person wants to assess where they might be on that spectrum, they could just reflect on their own experiences. And it may not even be experiences related to the field that they're in.
Mm.
You know, we succeed in so many different areas of our life, and we can draw on those experiences as resources to apply in any other area too.
Yeah.
I think that people get stuck in traps, and I love this frame of traps. Harry Brown wrote a book. This is back, I think, in the early '80s, and when I read it, it really opened my mind up to some new perspectives. And his book is called How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World.
Mm.
And he identifies these traps that we find ourselves in. And, you know, trying to be someone else is a trap.
Mm.
And I watched a trainer who had trained with Tony Robbins. And you could tell he was just imitating Tony. He was trying to be a version of Tony. And it was so incongruent, it fell flat.
Mm.
And he knew it. And you could see it on his face. And so, you know, I'm a proponent of learning from lots of different people. Modeling is wonderful, but then making it your own. This is so important. And this is what really distinguishes someone who is successful in what they do, because they have been able to incorporate and integrate whatever ideas, whatever approaches, whatever mindsets that resonate with them in a unique way for themselves and bringing their own story to it.
Yeah.
We all like stories, don't we?
Oh, definitely.
They make things come alive. And so if someone is just regurgitating other people's words or even their stories, it doesn't seem authentic.
Yeah.
And most importantly, it doesn't seem authentic to themselves, because being authentic is crucial. So trying to be someone else is not being authentic. I think also, if a person is leading out of desperation for money or for fame, for notoriety, they're likely going to suffer more from impostor syndrome.
Mm.
When we're doing something because it's for the sake of doing it, and we know that we feel strongly about it, it's a passion that we hold, we're going to feel, again, much more authentic and in alignment with our own values.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when we talk about that first decade of life, that's really important. And we hypnotists know how important that is, because really many of the programs that our mind utilizes unconsciously are laid down in that first decade. Mm. And they come from all kinds of sources, people in our life who have hypnotic influence. I like to say that kids are like wet cement. And those people might be parents, they might be teachers, they might be clergy, they might be peers, might be the television, right? Mm-hmm. So that really creates a lot of how a person feels about themselves. And when they receive recognition or love that's based on their performance or how they look, we can call that conditional love. Then they learn to look through that frame instead of just feeling good about themselves and trusting themselves no matter what. And this is really crucial. I've had many clients who have presented with a need for perfectionism. Mm. And it's because as they were small children, they were commended when they did things well, or they did things right, according to the family frame. So they got straight A's, or, you know, they scored high in the soccer game. And why it's wonderful for parents to encourage their children to excel, if that's really where the attention is coming from, then it is conditional. Mm. And a person learns that unconsciously, and they never really feel good enough. Even when they're at the top of their game in their field, there's this lingering self-doubt. And this can be what is fueling imposter syndrome.
Wow.
And so, as hypnotherapists, we know how to help a person move and shift that kind of a program and be able to keep the things that are meaningful for them.
Yeah.
I think also that in our country, there's this delusion that we need to be happy and calm all the time.
Yeah.
Just look at the antidepressant and anti-anxiety industry.
Yeah.
Billions sold, and people on these medications for years on end in an effort to try to achieve that state of happiness and calmness.
Mm.
Well, the truth is that the human experience has a great spectrum of emotion, and our emotions don't lie to us, they're valuable. And being able to be comfortable being uncomfortable is a strength. And if we are not allowing ourselves to be uncomfortable, then we're never going to face and move through challenges. We're just going to stay in that little comfort zone, and we don't grow. And to me, I'm 61 years old. That's the whole point of growing older, is to be able to challenge ourselves and to grow in some way. And that means that we're going to do things that are new, that feel unfamiliar, that might make us feel self-conscious or awkward in some way, uncomfortable. But that it's only the first time or two that you do something new, and then it starts to become familiar, right?
Right.
How cool is that? Whether it's a new relationship or a new car or a new class, a new course, a new presentation, you can be a little uncomfortable. That's okay. And everything has a form of energy. So then you can decide, am I really anxious or am I excited? And there's some other reframing that can be helpful. But if we try to suppress that, it doesn't work. In fact, that which resists persists. That's a frame that we hypnotists like to use a lot. So instead, channeling that energy in a different direction, or, like I said, reframing it as something else.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that you said that, because I know of people, and my former self as well, that when I met with something that was really uncomfortable, and others that I know, that it became debilitating, where they would just avoid it completely instead of being comfortable with being outside of your comfort zone. So I know that's like a real challenge for a lot of people. I'm, as an adult now in my 40s, I'm, I'll do things that are completely uncomfortable. And because I do value growth. Like, that is one of my biggest values, growth and connection. But I know for some people, they'll just avoid that obstacle completely all around. So
yes, and I know some people that actually face challenges that I wouldn't be interested in. I have no desire to do things. So, determining whether this is valuable for you. In the book that I mentioned earlier, Harry says there's a price to pay for everything. You just need to decide what price you're willing to pay. And so if being a bit uncomfortable for a while is worth it to you, then allow yourself to pay that price. And again, there are ways to manage that. And I think when it comes to things like imposter syndrome, one of the best frames is to think that this is something I'm going through, to recognize it, that this is a stage. And if you persist and move through it, then you're going to be just fine. And, there are many different solutions, but avoidance is one, certainly, but it doesn't allow us to grow, and it doesn't allow us to achieve wonderful things. And I'll confess, I've been practicing hypnosis for 18 years. So I have helped people overcome all kinds of challenges. And there came a time in my career when I had more and more requests to teach. And I told myself, no, I really like these, more of an introvert. I like these one-on-one small group interactions. I have no desire to go out there and teach to, large groups of people. I kept that up for several years until finally I couldn't fool myself anymore, because really we can't continue to fool ourselves. And I had to admit that I was afraid of it.
Mm.
And I was afraid of, being judged by my peers. I was afraid that I would get out there in some format and freeze up. And, even though I had public speaking background from another career, and when I finally faced that and admitted it to myself, then I had no choice other than to move forward, because I want to be congruent with what I'm teaching my clients, and to be brave. And the great thing is that being brave has nothing to do with not being afraid. It has everything to do with deciding to do it anyway. And I'm so glad I did. And for me, the impetus that got me to do that was to realize that I had something important to share, and people needed to hear it, especially in the field of pediatric hypnosis, teaching other hypnotists how easy it is to work with kids, because kids really need us. And I've made a great impact in that area, and I'm so glad that I got over my own fears about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and especially reaching kids, I would think. I mean, that's where they're kind of still being formed. So it's like helping them build their confidence and esteem, and then you get to have also that relationship with the parents, because it's really a dual thing, right? This syndrome is not just, it's about the parents who are kind of raising these children, and it's also about the children and their concept about themselves. So I'm curious how you have that dual relationship with both the parent and the child in your practice, and how do you kind of like get them both on board to make sure like these budding adults don't have imposter syndrome growing up and things like that. So I'm just curious.
That's a great point, and it's important to work systemically. Often the question is, whose problem is it really?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to involve the parents, and to involve the child in finding the solutions. I work in a solution-focused approach. So instead of focusing so much on the problem, which everyone has been up to that point, really helping to create solutions cooperatively with that child. And sometimes I'll even, often the parent is present during our work, and I'll use the parent as a prop or a demo. And kids really like that. So the parent gets the benefit of what we're doing too. But I think that anytime actually that we're working with adults, we're working with the child. It's a child part of us that gets up there and feels things like that imposter syndrome, or those nagging self-doubts. And what I really love about our work, Lonnie, is the science behind it, the neuroscience that shows how we get this negative feedback loop going in. And when these tracks are first laid down, often in those formative years, those neural pathways become sustained through repetition. So the more often someone feels these kinds of negative feelings, or has these thoughts, or even imagines them, those pathways are firing off, and they're becoming strengthened. First, they start out as just a little trail through the forest of our mind, and then they turn into a rut, and then they're a ditch, and then they're a trench. And the brain and the nervous system doesn't even know that there's another way to go through the forest. And so the strategies that we use help to forge new pathways. It helps to detour off of those entrenched ones. And I like this because we have some very simple techniques, some of which come from NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which allows this to happen almost organically. And with repetition, a person can be their own hypnotist. They can rewire their own brain, which is pretty cool.
And that kind of leads me into, solutions now. I mean, I know that you kind of had this way of living hypnotically. You're into mindfulness, and I know you do NLP. So yeah, I would love to start talking about discussions and talking about solutions for imposter syndrome, and how people can start approaching this differently in their minds. So if you have anything that you can kind of offer the viewers here, it'd be great.
I do. And, I had mentioned the idea of modeling, and that really means, picking some icon or person, alive or not, or even not a human being. It could be, a character or a cartoon. Sometimes it's superheroes when we work with kids, and in modeling those characteristics. Now, that can be very helpful, but it can also get them in that trap of pretending to be someone that they're not.
Yeah.
So, I think looking within, because we all have within us different aspects of our personality, and we call them ego states, parts, that have strengths, that are resources for us. And I have one inside of me that comes from my cultural background. My mother is from Finland, and the Finns have a national word. It's a spirit. It's called sisu, S-I-S-U, and it personifies and represents this never say die attitude, because the country of Finland, for historically, had other neighboring countries trying to dominate it, from Sweden to Russia, and the Finns just didn't give up. They refused to. As a nation, they were united in their cause for independence. And so this word sisu represents this. It's this dogged perseverance. And I think it's in my DNA. I believe it is. And so, it was unconsciously modeled for me growing up. I heard the word. It wasn't really, talked about very much, but I started to notice this even when I was in my early teens, that, there's this ability to kind of forge through and push through things that I had, a trust in myself and a trust in my life. And eventually, later on in life, I just started to call it sisu because it clicked for me. And so I'm able to draw on that nature within me. Sometimes I'm able to share that with my clients just by telling that story. But interestingly enough, many people have something similar. They have an ancestor. They have a heritage. I think of the Native Americans and how many resources they have within themselves. And perhaps you're thinking of some part of yourself right now that you can draw on, and let yourself just really engage in that. And listeners can do that too. Some part of themselves that maybe has inherited or learned somewhere along the way how to be authentically strong, to persevere, maybe a sense of an inner warrior that is assertive, doesn't have to be aggressive, that has a wisdom that can help guide you. Just getting in touch with that. Sometimes we even visualize it. It might manifest as a version of ourselves, or it might look like someone else, or something else. Some kids like to think of it in an animal form, as a matter of fact. And let that just grow within you. Notice where you feel it in your body. Our body is always responding to whatever we're thinking about. And let this nature, this spirit within you, grow even stronger. Let it double. Maybe you even have a name for it, like I do, or a word. And we can anchor this. We can associate what you're feeling right now with a physical gesture. Many people enjoy just putting the tips of a thumb and the index finger together on one hand, like you're making an OK sign, and just squeezing those fingertips together, just gently pressing that. This creates a kinesthetic association with the neural pathways that are now running about this inner warrior of yours. Maybe you want to take 3 deep breaths to further anchor that. So that in the future, whenever you want to feel this, whenever you want to activate this very powerful part of you, you can put those fingertips together. You can take those 3 deep breaths. Maybe you can think that name or word that you're associating to it. And you can utilize this as a very wonderful, powerful, automatic resource state. And it can move you up and beyond any of those feelings of self-doubt, any feelings of just not being good enough. any feelings of not thinking that you don't deserve this kind of success. Because this part of you knows better, doesn't it? In fact, you can even imagine yourself doing that right now in some situation where maybe in the past you would have been suffering from some of those negative feelings, those useless feelings. Or maybe you just imagine yourself activating it as you get ready for something new in your life, some new challenge. Understand now that just by even doing this kind of a mental rehearsal, that you're creating the blueprint for your unconscious mind, your subconscious mind, so that it finally understands what you really want. Making it clear with this template. And I think you're going to be really surprised. And I think your viewers are going to be really surprised at how this very simple tool is going to enhance their lives.
I love that.
Easy. It's so easy.
Love that. So good.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know how that works for you.
I will. It will help me right now. So it was great. So I appreciate your time, Kelley. This was great. So thank you so much. I might need to have you on the show again at some point.
Yeah, well, I had a great time talking, and I look forward to seeing your whole series.
Thank you. Thank you. And just remember, viewers, you're all worth it.
Yes.
Thank you for watching this episode of Worth It. And if you're wondering where you can learn more about me, well, I'm a hypnotist, NLP practitioner, and energy healer based in Hollywood, California. You can book a session with me at the shop I work at by going to liberatehollywood.com. But if you're out of the state, I do work through Zoom. And you can find more about me on my website, LonnieBuess.com. That's LANIBUESS.com. Feel free to email me at change@LonnieBuess.com or find me on Facebook at Coach Lonnie B or Instagram at Lonnie_B_change. And check out my YouTube channel, Lonnie Buess, where you'll find a bunch of videos to watch. And if you want to join the Facebook group for this very show, go to facebook.com/groups/worthitshow. Thanks again for watching this episode. Feel free to email me to give me feedback on how you're loving it. And again, just remember, you're worth it. Until next time.